Hello, everyone. Welcome back to AI Summer Week 2. I will be leading us today in our discussion of more in-depth skills and answering your questions from last time. I hope we all have a great time. All right, let me pull up my materials and I put the link in the chat. But you can find, if you'd like to follow along presentations, you can find them. Um, at our GitHub repo right there. And you can find, as well as the recordings, that's where they will be posted and all of that good stuff. All right, let me see. Let me do my best to present. Zoom has, oh, all my buttons always change. Okay, here we go. Can you all see my screen now? And then if I present, start from beginning. Here we go. All right, perfect. So hello everyone, my name is Myranda Shirk. I am a senior data scientist and lecturer at the Data Science Institute and the CCC. I teach some of our master's students, some of our second year's master's students, and I do some data science research projects here. Before I was at Vanderbilt, well, way before that, I was actually a grad student here at Vanderbilt. I completed our master's in data science here, so I am also an alum of the same program that I now get to teach, which is a really cool experience. And then after graduation, I went to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, worked as one of their first data scientists in their data archives for the National Centers for Environmental Information. So my background is a lot in environmental science, computer science, data science, and AI, and how all of those things intersect. So those are the kinds of projects that I typically take on, are more environmental science based, and I'm really excited to be here to talk about. Uh, are continuing our AI summer and talking about applying skills in our projects. All right, so I was looking at, I have, you've probably seen me around in the chat answering questions and just generally helping out. So I've been around and I was perusing through the chat and kind of compiled together some of these questions that I saw that kept coming up from last week. So I just want to make sure that we address them. So first, where exactly does a skill live on your computer, on the disk, inside a project, like physically, or maybe, visually, where is that? How does one actually write a skill? What does that file look like? What does it look like in practice when an agent uses my skill? We had a lot of questions about like, well, how do I know that the agent is using my skill? What does that look like when I open Claude? And how do I know that it's using my skill or something else or not a skill at all? Just some clarifications on the model, agent, skill framework, that whole thing. How does it all fit together? How do we know if something should be a skill? And how do we know how many skills it is? Like, is it one skill? Is it many skills? Is it not even a skill? And then finally, how do we judge whether the skill is actually doing what we want it to do? And this one is actually the last point. I think you can see my mouse. The last point is actually what we planned on talking about today. But given just so many of the questions and, skills are so new relatively to all of this, I wanted to make sure that we addressed all of these. So hopefully, the goal for today's session is that you'll be able to answer all of these. Let me see, is this six? All of these six questions, right? So hopefully we'll clear some of these things up. Also, just to look forward, so you have an idea of what our schedule looks like for AI Summer. It's a bit different this year. So today we're going to be going over more skills practice. I'm going to address some of those questions, and then we'll also start some more hands-on stuff. So I know a lot of people like to, get their hands on the keyboards and actually start editing stuff. That's always a lot of fun. Thursday is even more of that. We're going to be doing more coding. We're going to look into kind of the more in-depth, if skills won't get you where you need quite, your project is a little more advanced or a little more complex. How can you code up some of these solutions? And it's a lot easier than it used to be. We're going to be looking at LangGraph, deep agents with LangChain, and a lot of people have asked about OpenClaw, stuff like that. So we're going to be looking into more of those in-depth complex solutions, or how you can build out those, as well as start thinking about your hands-on projects and what you want to do when we divide into cohorts, which I'll explain in a second. I'm hoping to get in an ethics guest discussion with Dr. Sarah Burris at some point, either Thursday or Tuesday. We still need to work out her schedule and when she's able to come. But she has also been attending. Dr. Sarah Burris teaches our ethics course for our master's students and just has a really wonderful perspective. I think it's really important for us to keep in mind. Just because you can do something with AI, maybe you shouldn't do it with AI, you know? And there's a lot of stuff happening right now in regards to policy and in regards to ethics and in the AI space that people are very concerned about. So I want to keep us centered in that and know, what's our responsibility when it comes to creating these AI tools. And then week 3 to 4, we've kind of talked about this a little, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So we're spending essentially the first 2 weeks of AI summer going over the essentials. What do you need to start your project? What do you need to complete it? And then we're actually going to just break out into these project cohorts. So you'll get the chance to just work on your projects, have us as consultants, have your other classmates as colleagues, and you can bounce ideas off of each other. So our idea for this is that we will have two separate tracks. The first is kind of a very specific track. This is the course development track for Vanderbilt faculty, rethinking what and how they're going to teach in light of AI. It doesn't have to be AI related courses. It can be any type of course, but how are you changing what you're teaching in response to what AI is able to do? What are you want to challenge your students to do, as well as developing, more AI forward courses. So Jesse Spencer Smith will be leading that track. It'll be for anyone VU faculty that wants to kind of, revamp their courses alongside other faculty. What are we all thinking about this summer? And then the other track that we have is the Solution Builders track. This is just everyone else that's doing something not course related. So if you have some sort of problem or solution that you want to solve this summer, or anytime, how can we do that using all of the I almost said all of the skills we've learned, I guess. Okay, all of the skills that we've learned during AI summer. So if you forgive that pun. But essentially applying what we have talked about. So, capturing domain expertise, your domain expertise, keeping that human in the loop, writing those skills. My Zoom thing is, oops, it just really wanted to go forward. Okay, capturing the skills, co-building some of those solutions, and then delivering, that workflow to whatever your non-course problem is. So I invite you to go ahead and start thinking about, I assume that many of you are interested in AI and you perhaps came here with a problem you wanted to solve. So, keep that churning in your brain. What do you want to try to accomplish by the end of this month? And then hopefully by the end of AI summer, you will come out with some sort of product or some sort of starting point for the project that you had been hoping to work on. And I know I've talked with a lot of you during office hours about what you're hoping to do. We've answered questions in the chat. So I'm really excited to see what everyone is going to accomplish by the end of the month. Okay, so before I get into that, are there any questions about what the rest of AI summer is going to look like? Because I know that was a lot of information and I want to make sure we all have our goals aligned.
I have a quick question. I actually missed first 2 minutes, so I'm sorry for joining late. Uh,
That's fine.
this project is like individual or group based, like multiple professors making a group and doing something.
It's up to you. We're not
Okay.
assigning groups or anything.
Okay.
So
Thank
if there's people that you're already working with, you can work with them, but it's really just make your own thing.
And
Thank
Emerald might be joining us actually for the course development track, and that'll be a little bit
Oh,
more
you. Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, that's my plan.
yeah, exactly right. And so actually, yes. So I sent out an email earlier today. You'll choose the course that you want, and we'll actually be developing some tools together to begin with, and then we'll
Mhm.
begin development of our individual courses.
Thank
Yeah. And then I see a question in the chat. Can we move between the tracks and cohorts? I don't see why not. Jesse, do you have any thoughts?
Sure. I think that would be fun. For the BU faculty, we might ask for it to actually just be folks who are interested in course
Right.
development, because that's going to be pretty targeted. But absolutely, we can be
Great. Awesome. Thank you for those questions. Feel free to keep asking questions if we have any more. I'll also be budgeting for a break right around noon Central Time, because I know that after maybe 50 minutes or so on Zoom, my body starts to rebel against me and needs a break. So I'll be building in that break for us later as well. And then, of course, we also have our office hours, I think for the 30 minutes after the class ends. And so if you have more specific questions or you just want to talk one-on-one with some of us, feel free to bring your questions there too. Okay, I'll try to be watching the chat to see if any questions come through, but I'm just going to keep trucking. All right. Great. So, just some learning objectives for today, what I'm hoping that you'll get out of this. I put those 6 questions on there, but then I'm trying to kind of summarize them here as well. So hopefully by the end of the day, you'll be able to articulate each role in the model agent skill framework, as well as your own role. Dissect a task into skills, one or many skills, and then even author your own skill, which some of you may have done, some of you may not have done that yet. We're gonna try to do it. Judge whether a skill you've built is working, identify where it's falling short. We're going to talk about evaluation of these skills as well as spec-driven development. If you attended AI days, I gave a talk on that. So I'm going to kind of quickly review some of that as well. And following into that, writing those specification files to direct your application development. How do you really purposefully create these applications and guide your AI, guide the agent to actually get a worthwhile project out of it? So just to show these questions again. All right, so just as a check-in, I know we've been doing some of those like participant. I think if you click on participants and then maybe there's a dot. Oh, it might have moved. I don't know. Somewhere there's emojis somewhere. You can put it in the chat or put it up by your face. But I would like to see a green check if you have built or modified a skill yourself, either during AI Summer or before this. Yellow if you read one, but maybe didn't make any changes. And then red if skills still feel kind of abstract to you. You haven't really dealt with them and describing them is kind of hazy. Under React. Okay, thank you. I feel like every time I log into Zoom, the buttons have rearranged themselves. Okay, awesome. I'm seeing some. Great. Okay, I'm seeing a good mix. I love it. Oh, and people are getting creative. Yeah, I guess there wasn't like a yellow button besides hearts or something. Oh, yes, I like the cat one. Thank you. Okay. Okay, and then there's a red heart. I don't know if that's good or bad in the context of this. Great. Awesome. Okay, so I'm seeing a pretty even, maybe leaning a little more towards the red, but pretty even between green and red, maybe leaning a little more towards skills still feel abstract, which is awesome because that's what I prepared for. So that means that this lecture will hopefully be helpful to you. So if you feel super confident with skills, that's awesome. I hope this is still great. Feel free to, put in your questions or your thoughts. I love to hear it. But that's great. So we're gonna try to make those skills feel less abstract. And then even if you've already built or modified a skill, we're gonna really go into it. How do you do that the best way possible? How do you actually make sure that you get out what you want from that? Thanks so much for that participation. This is great. I love when we have a cohort that is so active with us. It's always awkward when it's just silent. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, just to kind of go back on some of this, we talked before about this agent framework, and Jesse, I stole this directly from your slide screenshots because I really like this chart that you have here. So this agent framework is what we've been talking about, and I just want to make sure that we all understand what all the different parts of this are. What is the LLM? Where am I? Who am I? Right? All of this. So I kind of want to zoom in on some of these things because there's a lot in this chart and it's very rich. So let's just, here's the zoom out. We're going to zoom in on some of these parts here. So first of all, if I zoom in, right? So I'm going to zoom into this part with the LLM. Right, this is our LLM. This is the large language model. It's the next token predictor, right? This is just chat essentially. So we've got, some sort of input, we've got attention, we've got all this neural network stuff happening, and then what comes out of this is, text. This is the basics of an LLM, right? You put text in, it puts text out. So that's the LLM part. And by itself, it can't really do much, right? By itself, this is just a conversation with a computer, essentially. It's not going to be able to, I mean, we've got tool calls over here, but if you kind of, are just looking at this center part, what it's doing is just predicting that next token, and you're putting input in, it's giving you the output. It's not connected to anything. It's not, looking stuff up on the internet. Really, I'm just looking at this, thinking, reasoning text. And then the next step from that text is maybe it can write some code, maybe it can call some tools, but it's going to put out that call. It's not actually doing anything, right? So we've got just basically our text creator, our next token predictor. That's the LLM at the center. The harness around it is kind of the directions for this. It's it's kind of the harness around everything that's telling it what to do. So we've got the LLM wrapped up in this harness that gives it access to some of these tools, right? So that's kind of the agent. The agent is what's actually doing stuff. The LLM's not doing anything. It's the harness that enables the LLM to call out an agent, and the agent can actually do things. And then we can kind of zoom out further and kind of see that you're in this working space. And I think the next, yep, so if we look at this working space where you are in the directory, now this is where we get to the context and the things that your harness can access. So we've got your documents, right? And Jesse, please correct me if I misinterpret your diagram, but we've got your documents, right? We've got memory, perhaps the context of, what you've been chatting about with the tool. We've got, graph representations of this. This is all within the harness that it has enabled this. So when we're talking about Claude Code or Claude Cowork, it's kind of built into this software. And then we've got skills, what we've been talking about. And notice that skills looks just like documents. Why is that? Well, because skills are just documents, essentially, right? Skills are a folder that contain a markdown file, and the skill is going to inform the model on what it needs to do. And so this harness enables it to access all of these things, right? So if we step back again, at the center is this LLM. It doesn't do much by itself. But when we give it a harness and agents, the agents are the doers, right? The agents are the doers that can go out and get your documents. They can get these skills. They can interpret them. And then you're kind of giving more agency, right, to your LLMs to make it a little more useful. I saw a lot of things happening in the chat, so I'm going to... Okay, perfect. All right, we're answering that. Yes, a token is essentially a word or subword. You can replace it with word if you would like for this example. So are there any questions about this agent framework? Because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as this agent framework. How is this actually working? Because I did see a lot in the chat about like, oh, I'm making an agent, or am I making a skill, or am I training it? Not training, you're not making an agent. Really what we're looking at is making skills, which the agent enables the LLM to use, right? Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second to make sure, are there any questions about this whole setup here that we're talking about? And thank you, Jesse, for catching the questions.
I'll add that now it really is the case that you can have a really good model, but a bad harness, and you won't have a very good agent. You need to have a decent model and a really good harness, and then you can get something which can really do some good work for you.
Right. And I see a question in the chat. Do we make our own harness? No. I mean, you could, but I don't recommend it, right? This is like when you download a software like Claude Code, that's the harness, right? That's the harness. So the only thing that we have taught you to edit is the text inside of these skills, right? And I really wouldn't recommend anything beyond that unless you have a very, very complex problem, in which case I want to talk to you one-on-one to see what that problem is, right? But no, so you're not making an agent, you're not making a harness. The harness is essentially the software that wraps around the LLM. So if you'd like to think in terms of software, it's like Microsoft Word allows you to edit documents. I'm making up this example on the spot. I hope it works. But Microsoft Word is a software that lets you edit documents. When you want to edit your document, you're not having to create Microsoft Word all over again, right? You just open it and it gives you that harness to be able to edit Word documents, right? So that's kind of similar. Gretchen, go ahead.
Thank you. Quick question. I was reading about the harnesses last week in anticipation of our, this month's coursework. And I'm just wondering, do you guys have some research literature that pertains to this? And in particular, I was thinking about the sort of the preliminary decision making that appears to be happening, right, as it's pulling in certain documents, skills, but not others. And that's all I'll leave on the table for now. But I would love to know more about the harnesses and how they make those decisions.
Yeah, so and I'll let some Jesse if you want to take it as well too, but I can get a start on it. But the only literature that I can think of immediately, and maybe there's some more on there that Jesse knows, is usually when Claude puts out something like Claude Code, they'll usually put out a white paper or something about it, and that will kind of describe it. Really, the decision making though is kind of just baked into, as far as I'm aware, just like the descriptions of things, right? So we have the skills, and how does it decide what skill to use? It's just looking at the description of the skill and then using the LLM to process that description of the skill. And then semantically, like if you want to look at it mathematically, it's semantically comparing how close is the description of this skill to what I actually want to do. And so the decision making is not really, it's not really, I don't think really baked into the harness. It's more just a result of them telling the harness, hey, when you get, a request from the user, you're going to look at the descriptions of these things at your disposal and see which one you should use. Jesse, anything else?
Yeah, and I would say actually for that very first pass, you actually you preload into the context of the model the title of the skill and the description of the skill. That's why you want both of those to be pretty short. So you want them short to be very, very good because that's what's going to first trigger it. Um, in terms of research and literature on this, there are a few papers that are out there, but it's very preliminary because really people didn't start using skills heavily until December and really January. So it's been very, very recent. And models of different sizes have different capabilities of handling skills, but almost all models now are skills capable, meaning they're trained to preload that name, the name and the description, and they're pre-trained to assess whether a skill would be helpful in any particular task that they're in right now. It'll do a little bit of reasoning about that as it looks to see if it has information about that. Retrieval is an important thing. We know that if you load up a lot of skills that have overlapping descriptions, you run into problems because it doesn't know which one it needs to load. So a lot of this still is empirical. You build it and you
Hmm.
test it.
Yeah, and I love that question too, and I see the thumbs up. Great. Sorry, Gretchen, did you want to say something else?
I was just going to say, we all are really at a wonderful place and time to be able to do this sort of experimentation instead of just ourselves. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that attitude towards it too. Thank you for the question. And these kinds of questions are great. I've been seeing a lot of them. I think one thing if I want everyone to take away from this is a lot of this is we get questions about that. What's the research on this? What's the research on? It's so new. It's so new that us using it is kind of the research, right? So if there's a question you want to answer about it, but also, questions about how is AI making this decision or that decision. I hesitate to call it decisions, a lot of the times because like I said, it's just reading the description of a skill and then choosing it. It doesn't have any sort of like independence to do it. It's not just doing it willy-nilly. It's not like a person that has, free will. It's to get existential a bit. It's just looking at descriptions of things and comparing them mathematically. It's math at the end of the day, right? Great. Other questions? All right. Keep them coming if you have them. I love this. Okay, so that's our framework, right? So we're going to kind of be building off of this. This is what I'll be referencing. We're talking about, this is the LLM in the center. We've got this agentic harness around it, which is just kind of equipping the LLM with extra things it can do. And then you've also got the context out here, like the documents that you load in, the directory that you have, the skills that we'll be looking at and editing that kind of instruct a model on what to do. Great. Okay, so where a skill lives, and this got a little blurry. That's disappointing, but that's okay. So where a skill lives. So I was able to kind of co-make this little chart with Claude after talking about it and experimenting with my own computer. So we got a lot of questions. Where is the skills? Where are the skills? Where is the .claude folder? Do I make that? Does Claude make that? Okay, so Claude, when we're opening Claude Code or Claude Cowork, and you ask it to make a skill or you load in the skills that it already has, Claude is making that .claude folder. A lot of folders that start with dot are something that you don't have to worry about, right? So the .claude folder, you can have a global one, which is where it's going to load up the global skills, the skills that you want on every project on your machine. A lot of the times when you download Claude and you load in all those skills, which I think happens automatically, the ones that Anthropic develops, it's going to be in the root, right? So that's what the squiggly means. So that's just the root of your computer, and then the .claude folder, and then the skills folder, right? And then this skill name is just kind of a placeholder for all the named skills that you have. So this is global, right? Every project on your machine can access something like this because it's right at the center of your computer, right at the very root of all of your folders. So that's one way to do it. And that's great if you have skills that are very versatile. You can use them in a bunch of different projects. For instance, the Claude skills that kind of come preloaded are, PowerPoint related skills, like read a PowerPoint, create a PowerPoint, the like web development skills. That's not specific to any project. Probably several projects you'll want to create a PowerPoint, you'll want to search the web, you'll want to write a Python script, for instance. Those are very global skills, and Claude just automatically puts them here. Now, for a project, there's a couple ways to do it. When you're creating a skill, or when you open Claude Code, sorry, let me step back. When you open Claude Code or Claude Cowork, it's usually going to ask you to select a project folder, right? And that's the folder Claude is going to work out of. So let's say that this is our project folder, the project root right here. And then when you start Claude up and it starts creating stuff for you, it creates a .claude folder. Again, not something you have to worry about. Claude is just going to make this for you. And so you can actually go in and look at skills, look at the skills. If you start authoring skills yourself with Claude, it's going to put those into the .claude folder, into the skills folder with that skill name, right? This could also be if you download a skill from someone. And then in that case, there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? Claude has access to your system. So if you don't want to be messing around, which I don't really recommend if you're not familiar with terminal stuff or project directory stuff, you don't have to touch any of these folders. You could even ask Claude Cowork, hey, I want to load in this skill, put it in my skills folder for you to access, and Claude will do that for you, right? So if project directories and terminals and computer stuff is not your thing, I would highly recommend just allowing Claude to do it. Read what it's doing, be secure about it, give it access to a folder you're comfortable Claude editing. But we saw a lot of questions about like, oh, how do I make this folder? How do I make this folder? Claude can kind of handle it for you. Now, because I am more of a terminal person, I'm more hands-on, I like to do stuff. I don't know. I'm independent. And so what I will do a lot of times is I will create a folder for myself. I won't create the .claude folder. I let it just do its thing. But maybe I'll create a skills folder, or I'll point it to a specific folder I want it to use for skills. That's a little more manual, and that's totally fine. So you can also do that as well. Jesse, were you about to say something?
I was just going to add also, we're a little bit early days with skills as well. So if you create a skill and if you want that skill to be available in Claude Web, like the chat, or in that desktop app like Cowork, then you would actually load that all the same way as you would, which is going to be under the application. You'll go to what's it called? So you go to customize, and you can load up the skill there. so you can actually have the skills saved. And we'll go through an example of this as well. But just so you know, there's sort of like two different places where skills live. If you're doing Claude code on your desktop, where it's running locally, it's going to be exactly what Myranda is saying right here. And if you're working in the desktop app, it can be a little bit different. But when you do load a skill there, it becomes available to you wherever you're running Claude in the desktop app, or if you're running it just through a chat online. So locally on your machine or web-based.
Right. And so there's two other things that are kind of a little more, not niche exactly, but again, things that you don't really need to pay attention to a bunch. So in your session, if you ask Claude to help you author a file, a skill, for instance, and you know, when Claude is showing you like the side by side, like here is, all right, I'm helping you author this thing. Maybe it's a Word document. Maybe in this case, maybe it's a skill, like a markdown file. And it'll usually open up a little side window and then you can see what it's doing, right? You can see the document it created. Computer wise, you have to save that somewhere, right? For you to be able to view it and see it and for Claude to edit it. So it kind of creates a temporary file. Again, not something you have to worry about or even know, but we got questions about it, so I just want to address it. So Claude will be creating temporary files inside of this Claude.claude folder. Nothing you need to worry about. It's just how it is able to save like what it's working on, what it's drafting with you, right? And then finally, Anthropic puts out their own skills. They have the repo, which we have shared. And I don't remember if we have a link to it on our own repo, but we should put it on there so people can find it. But basically, Anthropic, when they pushed out this whole thing about skills, they pushed out, you know, their own authored skills. And you can't really change these directly. You could copy them and change them to your liking, but you don't, you know, again, not something to worry about. But these are just shipped with Claude Code, Claude Cowork. They just come with Claude Code, I'm pretty sure, or at least mine did. So you don't author these. These are like, you know, the PowerPoint ones, the PDF ones, the skill creator ones. So when we call skill creator, at least I didn't have to load that. I say I'm speaking very carefully because I feel like they make updates to these softwares all the time. So in my version of the software, I did not have to upload or download skill creator. It kind of was just there. And it comes pre-installed. Okay, and then I'm gonna thank you Jesse Bloker for that link. I'm gonna pause because I saw a lot of activity happening in the chat. Okay, great. Yep. Um, awesome. And then are we going to make the lecture recording and lecture notes skill available? I think that's Jesse's skill.
Yeah, be very happy to, with the caveat that if you do something to improve it, please share it back.
Right. Yeah, this is very, very collaborative. I don't know the licensing on skills. Maybe I should look into that, but something interesting to think about. Yeah, specific license. Yeah, I need to look more into that. And I think even skills now, when I was reading up yesterday in preparation for this, they even include information about licensing, which I feel like is a new detail that they're starting, or maybe I just didn't pay attention to it. I don't know. Interesting stuff. Okay, great. So this was kind of, you know, I wanted to address the file structure stuff. And then in part of this, I will also just kind of pull up my own file directory so you can see, and if you want to click around with me, just, you know, see where this is if we have interest in that. But basically, here's kind of a view of that. So, you know, if we were talking about, you know, the Nissan Smyrna project that we had as an example, let's say that this is our folder here, our project folder. This is called a file directory tree or a file structure tree. You can create stuff like this by just typing tree into your terminal for a specific folder, and it creates this nice visualization of it. But essentially, here's my project folder that I've pointed Claude Code or Claude Cowork to. Data is maybe a folder that I created. Notes is maybe a folder I created. README is the README that I created. But I asked Claude to work inside this folder as an example. And Claude, you can see in there, creates the .claude folder. And then any skills that I've authored with Claude within this folder, it then creates a skills folder, puts that skill in there as its own folder. the skill.md file, which we can edit directly. That's the actual instructions inside the skill, as well as the other folders that the skill might need. So we'll talk about what folders these are, but in this case, it also needed scripts, and then this one needed references. So this is kind of what that file structure tree looks like when we talk about like where does all this stuff live. Okay, and then I kind of just pointed all of this out, but right, so this is our project folder. This is our, I'm going to close the chat. Okay, this is a project specific skill right here, right? So it's not global. It's only accessible really to this folder here because it lives inside of it. And then we have another project specific skill here. Now let's zoom out and say that maybe this folder is within my, C/doc Myranda/documents folder. And we zoom out to my root directory and maybe there's a .claude folder way out here that then has another skills directory. That would also be accessible here, right? Because it's outside of that file tree, it can access it. So just kind of a multi-view of where all of these things are living. So hopefully that cleared some things up. Okay, so now let's kind of pivot into dissecting a skill. So what exactly is a skill? It's essentially a folder with a markdown file in it at the very least, right? So let's say I have my skill, it's called my-skill. Claude is going to create, or you can create a folder that is, the folder name is the name of the skill. And then inside that folder, the very basic thing it needs to have to function is skill.md. That's actually the name of it. It's not going to have the skill name on there. It's just inside the folder and then literally name it skill.md. So this is the only thing that's required. This is the file that the model is going to see, right? We talked, Umang showed last time, I think, about the YAML up at the top of the document that has name, my skill, description. My skill is used for blah, 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 right? So that's what's in that markdown file at the top. And then the rest of it is all the instructions essentially that come with that skill that you write or that Claude helps you write. Also, what can be inside of a skill is the scripts directory. So this is if your skill needs any sort of helper code, Python or R. Like if your skill is to create some sort of web app, for instance, then maybe it'll have a script for starting up a web app. Or if your skill is some sort of data analysis, then maybe you'll have a script in here for data analysis in Python or something, right? Again, we are usually creating skills with Skill Creator, unless you're just super advanced and you know everything that needs to happen. And Skill Creator will, walk you through what it's going to do, and it'll basically create these for you, right? References, this is also optional. This will be, documents that you have. Maybe if you have a corpus of papers that you that are relevant to this skill, something that you want the skill to be aware of, or you want the model to be aware of, or cognizant of. It's only going to really load those on demand as it needs it. So if you have, trying to think of a good example for this, but let's say there's a specific, I don't know, in a specific case, if you see this subject mentioned, maybe let's say you're writing a summary document of a talk and they reference a specific subject in the talk. And if they reference that subject, you want the skill, if it's writing notes on this lecture, you want the skill to like cite a paper or something. Then maybe you have the paper within the references. That I just made that up. Jesse, do you have a better example for when references is used?
That's going to be that's going to be any time that you need to have additional documentation that you might need to pull up. So this is a way for you to have, you don't want to like load a lot of heavy things in here. So if you use Skill Creator skill, it'll do a pretty good job of like putting just the lightweight versions and only the things you absolutely need, because you don't need to have like a ton of stuff. And if you do have stuff here, it ought to be Markdown or something lightweight. But the saving grace here is that loads are hierarchical, right? So you preload the name and the description. Then if the model believes that it needs it, it will ask the harness to bring in the skill.md. It'll bring the skill.md. If you're doing something with the skill that requires programming or scripts, it'll load the scripts that it needed. If it needs additional references, it'll load those references. So it doesn't load everything. But that being said, you don't want to have just like a ton of cruft in there they don't really need in there.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, this is more optional. And then evals will do a little bit of a deeper dive into this. Essentially test cases. So, how do you know that your skill is working? We're going to be talking about how this skill is going to evaluate itself. And Skill Creator is pretty good at this too. It all goes ahead and creates evals and kind of evaluates itself and gets your feedback and stuff. And then the license that we talked about, right? So if you're going to share your skills, we need to start thinking about licenses, which, to be perfectly honest, I don't know a ton about at this moment. But essentially, right, so this is the skill. When we're talking about, maybe skills are a little nebulous right now. Here it is, physically or digitally. Right, a skill is a folder with the name of the skill. Inside of that folder, bare bones, you need this skill.md file. You can literally just write it. It's a markdown file, it's just text. And you can edit it yourself. So if something's going wrong, you don't like what it's doing, edit the skill file, right? And then all of this are just essentially helpers, helper files for if the skill needs to reference something else, like it needs to run code or it needs to look up something, right? So that is essentially what a skill is. So now that we have this, I want to give you some hands-on time. So I'm going to create some breakout rooms. If you don't like breakout rooms, that's okay. You can stay in this room and kind of work alone. But I recommend it though, because I think it'll be good. Anyway, so maybe take the next 10, what time is it? Maybe take the next 10 minutes, pick a skill you found, a skill you have or that's included in Claude, dissect it like I just did, right? So read them, see what's inside of this folder here. See if you can figure out what the skill does, when the model will use it. Optionally, you can look through some of those other folders like the references, the evals, read, just poke around in it and see what it is. And then we're going to kind of report back on what we found so that you all get that you get that applied experience of dissecting that skill yourself and understanding what this is. So I'm going to stop sharing
Oh,
for
and Miranda,
Oh, yes.
I just did you actually show them how to get to what the skills are in the Claude desktop already?
No, I don't think I did.
If you'll stop your share, I'll share, and then
All right.
I'll show you how to get to that.
Okay, perfect. While you
Uh,
do that, I'll create breakout rooms
oh,
and
perfect. Okay, great.
we'll double up. Okay.
Share my whole screen. Always a dangerous thing to do, but I'm doing it anyway. Great. And then here we go. Okay, so let's just go to new task. So if you go over here and you see where it says you could be in chat or you could be in Cowork, you could even be in code. But in all of these, you're going to see customize, right? So if you click on customize, then it has like create new skills. So you can actually click on that and it will show you all the skills that it has. So here's like you can see skill creator. This is something that ships. You can say I've turned off some of these skills. It's like skill creator. Here's the title. Here's the description. You see it's nice and short. And then it has the text of the skill right here. This is the skill.md. Now it's not going to show you the you can read the SKILL.md and then you can actually see, well, what is it? What is that agents? What does that mean? Oh, it has the analyzer. It has the comparator. It has assets. You can look at the assets. Here's the eval reviewer. Here's the references. So you can see what the references look like. Schemas.md. See, this is a reference for how to actually create the different things. Skill Creator is one of the most complex skills that I've seen because it does a lot. Then you have other ones that are a little bit a little bit easier. Um, Here's my lecture to recording to lecture notes. This is a simple skill and then just some scripts. But this is what I wrote with Skill Creator. So you can go in here and take a look at it and read what it is and how it does its stuff. So that's a nice, easy way to see how to get to skills. You just make sure that if you're in here, you click here, open it up, click customize, and click create new skills. And then you're off and you're cooking with gas.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having that ready to go. Great. Okay, so I will open up the breakout rooms. Feel free to go in there and I'll be out here for questions or anything, but take the next 10-ish minutes and then I'll have you report back. So, take notes or be prepared to share with the class on what you found and maybe what you're confused by or what you learned. All right, I'm going to create those now. If you're not automatically pushed into them, you should be able to select them and I can help you. All right, the rooms are open. You should be invited to join them now. Okay, and I'm just going to pull up the instructions again so that you can see them if you're a visual person and you like to see the instructions. Oh, when I just saw your breakout room is empty. Sad.
Oh,
You should are you able to choose a different room or I can send you to um oh sure enough. Yeah, I see. I guess you're here. I can send you to another room if you want. All right, I invited you to a room with a person in it. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, Mirabelle, yeah, I see that. I will put you in a more populated room. Let me try to see where you are. Okay. All right, Mirabelle, you should have the invite to a different room. Yes, Sean, I can certainly do that. Um, all right, you'll go to room 1. Yes. This is our first time doing breakout rooms, I think, this summer, so sometimes we get a little I'll just make the rooms bigger next time. That's good to know. All right. Chin. Yep, I'll move you over. I think the one you are already in room 15, it looks like, which has several people in it. Hmm. Um, I think there's no one in room 11, Andrea. I'll send you to room 3. There's people in there. Chen, I can't do anything because it says that you're already assigned to room 15. You might have removed yourself. I didn't remove you, but I can't put you back in because it says you're already assigned. But I can assign you to a different one. Okay, I'll move you to a different one. All right. Looks like all those rooms closed up. Thank you so much for humoring me with that breakout room exercise. Congrats. That was the first one of AI summer. We had some hiccups. I appreciate you working with me on that. I hope that that was helpful. Feel free to send me feedback. Oh, wow. Applause. Okay. That's great feedback. Feel free if you need to like send me a message about if that worked or did not work for you, just let me know. I know we had some loners in the breakout rooms and I had to reassign you, so I'll make larger breakout rooms next time. And it looks like some people also just want to sit and listen, and that's totally fine. If you don't feel as confident or comfortable turning on your mic and camera, you just want to watch people kind of work. Also totally good. I'm good with all learning styles here, so just let me know if there's anything I can do to make something like more accommodating. So all right. Okay, cool. Great. Well, I'm glad that it seems like several people enjoyed it. I hope you got some hands-on time. So does anyone want to kind of raise, just speak up or put in the chat? Did anyone have any breakthroughs or just interesting things you want to talk about that you talked with your group?
I can go
Yeah.
quickly. So I was in the group that I was in, we were talking about various things, but one of the things that we talked about in the beginning is creating an agent that can stay up to date on SEO, so search engine optimization, or even SEM, search engine monetization. Both of those tools for in a business application can be make or break on whether or not you're getting views to your website or if you're targeting the right people via ads. Then the most difficult thing with those is that there's so much data to pay attention to that it's really hard for one person or a team of people to do it. And then on top of that, you need to try to stay up to date as much as possible with that information. So one of the skills that we were discussing was creating an agent that's not only able to understand the data, but also make sure that the way that it's interpreting the data is correct based on the latest documentation. I think the only uncertainty spot that we had was how do you get the agent to check that the documentation's up to date, like searching the internet for the correct references, and then if it's not correct, updating it correctly. And then as I talk about this right now, how much is that going to affect like your token usage for it to then go out, index it, update, and then run the skill? Like, are you going to encounter situations where you just run out of tokens and now you got to wait for the next day?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I love that. Really, really in-depth stuff. I know, yeah, sometimes the skills can run up your tokens a bit. It looked like Jesse, you were going to say something about it.
Oh no, I was just going to say in that there are actual other skills and also other MCPs which are specifically designed to keep track of most recent documentation in order
Mhm.
to keep that token use down low. Doing it the sort of the brute force way to begin with is not a bad one, but you can always turn it back around and say, all right, now because remember the skill creator skill that you use to create new skills can also modify skills. So once you get up and running and you're happy with it, now you can run that skill creator skill again and say, okay, now I want to make this more efficient. Using too many tokens, I'm having to restart and actually have it go out and search and update that. And so it still works, but actually uses, it does it more efficiently. So but it's a great way to get started, and it's a great problem to solve.
Yeah,
So,
great.
sorry, just a quick follow-up. Is your recommendation then to start with the skill creator skill or to start with like your idea and what you're trying to achieve, get to somewhere and then have Claude build a skill off of that and then iterate?
Mhm.
Is
I
there
mean, you can
pros and
kind of have
cons?
that conversation just kind of happens with Skill Creator.
Okay.
So like yeah, so what you're talking about, and just open up Skill Creator or ask for Skill Creator and then just have that conversation with Claude and that's just going to happen. That's just is what it's going to do.
And the other thing that I'll mention is if you're going to be building something that is very code heavy, then you might actually want to author the skill when you're in Claude Code, because Claude Code can do a much better job of writing that software. That's how I created my
Mhm.
lecture to lecture notes skill. I didn't do that in Cowork and I didn't do it in chat. I did it in Claude Code because I knew that it was going to have to write some heavy duty software. So it has more capability to do that. But Skill Creator will work wherever it is and whatever you got. Two different ways of doing it. If you want to figure out how to do it first, you can actually go through the process of doing the thing. And then at the end, you can say, hey, now I want to turn this into a skill. Or you can absolutely just start directly with skill creator skill and say, here's the kind of what I want to do. Help me think through it before we build the skill.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Any other insights from your breakout rooms? I'd love to hear what you guys discussed or what skills you looked at.
On our, I'm Karthik. On our breakout room, we were exploring two of the skills. PDF is one of the skill that we were looking onto the Anthropic's GitHub. So it was well structured. It was a little bit extensive as well. It did
Mm-hmm.
not had a reference folder though, but it did had a reference to a reference.md file.md and yeah, it did also had some scripts files into it, and as kind of the discussing about the tokens, it looks like it's token heavy as well. Don't know how much tokens it would consume to run through all of those skills, all the scripts, depending on the use cases. And also we did looked into the MCP builder a little bit as well. So it was very well structured in terms of skills.md, and it had a lot of references files as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's interesting to see, and you can, just kind of see literally by how big the folder is, like that,
Yeah.
how heavy is it? What is it gonna do? And I know Claude will sometimes put like how many tokens it's used to, so you can kind of see that. That was a relatively new thing, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention until recently, but I saw like when it was pulling a skill, it's like I've used this many tokens. But and what's cool about this is how human readable all of this is. Like, we're making it for the AI to do things, but it also helps us. Like, so I hope you guys are able to kind of get some insights on, oh, this is kind of, helps you understand it too.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Any others?
We looked at one that I had made last week,
Oh,
which
cool.
I made I used the skill creator skill to make a skill to write recommendation on letters for law school students. And it was useful to look at its guts because then I could see where my skill instructions were telling the agent to look at different things. And it gives me a better sense of whether it's doing it the way I thought it was doing it or doing it the way that I want it to do it. I maybe want to use a
Hmm.
different exemplar or those kinds of things. And so it was useful to kind of dig into the separate files that it had created because I didn't realize that's how it worked.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you kind of get the underbelly of it. It's interesting to see. And it's not as scary as you think. Yeah, that's great. Anyone else want to share? Awesome. Well, that was fun for me to hear what you all have been working on. And I really love the energy you guys are bringing. Being conscious of the time, I do see it's 8 minutes past when I said we were going to take a break. Sorry. So why don't we go ahead and take maybe I don't know. Do we want 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Are people needing like a five? Okay, I see a vote for five. A vote for five. Vote for five. Okay. I saw mostly five, maybe because it's easy to hold up one hand. But okay, great. So we'll take 5 minutes and go to the bathroom, get a snack or something, and then we'll come back. At what would that be? 13 or 14? Yeah, so 13 or 14. We'll come back. 13 or 14 minutes. 12, 14 is what I'm trying to say. All right, words. I need a break. Okay, see you in 5 minutes.
Elsie, are you there?
And Kayla, were you looking for me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I destroyed my computer.
Oh, you might just have run out of space, but you didn't destroy it. You'll just have to,
It
uh,
won't turn back on.
I would unplug it completely and just let
Okay.
it sit for a moment and then do a reboot. But you couldn't have destroyed it. You might have filled up the hard drive, but that's still solvable.
Well, I mean, like, I told it to restart,
Uh-huh.
and it's just not
Yeah, I would unplug it and just let it, totally reboot, and then give it like give it a full minute, and then plug it back in, and then restart. By downloading software, it doesn't physically change anything on the computer, but it might take up your hard disk space. But it should still turn on. That doesn't mean something else couldn't have happened at the same time, but uh, it should not have affected the your physical computer itself.
Well, I'm not so worried about the physical computer itself. I mean, but if it doesn't work, then it might as well be a brick.
Yeah. Yep, I would, like I said, give it a good and I would unplug to let it do a total reboot, right? Um, and then see if it comes back up, which it at some point it likely will, but I had a problem with the lectern computer the same way.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, from your break. I hope that gave you enough time. Go ahead and get my PowerPoint situation pulled back up. All right, hopefully you can see my screen again. See if I can. Awesome, thank you. Okay. All right, so welcome back. Thank you so much for participating in that exercise. Like I said, I hope it was helpful, and feel free to send me anything that maybe you need us to consider when planning these kinds of exercises, if that was helpful or if it wasn't. But it was really cool. I love seeing that the epiphanies in real time when people are saying like, "Oh, I get it now. We finally just open the folder and you can just look at it." And so, just explore around on your own computer with your Claude instance, and what skills do you have? Can you just pick up a skill and kind of read it, figure out what it does? It's kind of a fun activity, and it's not as scary as maybe it seems right at first. So thank you so much for that. So, Our takeaways from that exercise, skill is just a folder with a markdown file in it. That's it's most basic. It's got some extra stuff in there as helpers, but it's very human readable, which is really great. Because it helps us understand what the skill is and also what exactly the LLM is being instructed to do. The hardest part about a skill is being specific enough about what you want it to do, right? Communication, something that I've been saying over and over again, is that it's not that programming is the bottleneck now, it's communication is the bottleneck. Right? You don't have to be a brilliant programmer to come up with, these skills. It's literally just writing. And you have to write it very clearly so that you can understand it, other people can understand it, and, so that the LLM can understand what you want it to do. You need to think about all the cases, what could go wrong. You need to think about when you'll use it, when you won't use it, what output do you need. All of this stuff is now what you have to think about. And it's more, it's more kind of the end stages of the software engineering steps, or maybe the planning stages of software engineering steps. Very, very zoomed out focus. So that kind of leads me into, so there was our break. That kind of leads me into what I want to talk about eventually with evaluations and how exactly do you build in um, a very high quality skill and how do you communicate precisely what you want it to do. So I think another question that we had that I want to address was how can I tell if my skill is being used? There's three I guess three main ways. The first one is probably the easiest. It's in the event log that Claude is keeping track of. So, how can I tell if my skill is being used? It will say, using this skill or something, and I'll pull that up and show you in a second. You can also look at, it narrates everything that it's doing. You can look at the tool calls. At the very least, if you're like, the output that I'm getting makes me think that it's not using my skill. Like if something is just so wrong, I don't even know if it's actually doing what my skill is telling it to do. You can disable a skill and maybe disable it and then compare like does the base LLM do the same as something where has your skill, then maybe there's something wrong with your skill or something in there. But at its basic, you can just open up. So let me see. Like Jesse said, this is very dangerous. But let me start a chat with Cowork and then I'll show you. Okay, so I'm just going to do this very quickly so you can see it. We're not going to follow this all the way through, but all right, hopefully you can see Claude now. And notice how it says type / for skills. So, it's kind of already has the skill stuff. But let me see what would be an easy one to do. Like create a web app that gives me a form to fill out. And then hopefully it's going to activate that web app skill. We're just going to see. Like I said, I just made this up on the spot. But all right, look. So it says loading tools. Okay. It's working. It's working. It's loading tools. All right. Let's say, oh, it's just gonna, okay, I'm gonna say save to a file. Okay. It's dangerous to try to come up with examples on the spot. All right, but it is narrating what it's doing. It's creating a file and hopefully it uses a skill and it'll tell me that.
Could you zoom in a little bit more?
Oh, yes. So this is what I mean when I say it's narrating. And sometimes you can click down on this. Oh, and it might just be writing this and not actually using a skill because I asked it to do something simple. Let's see.
This is actually a common thing where if
Yeah.
you're not explicit enough, it might not do the skill, but you'll see it never said skill, right?
Yeah.
So you can actually check and see what it does. And this is how you can audit whether or not it actually fires up a skill or not. If it doesn't, or if you want to be sure that it loads up a skill, use / and then you give the name of the skill, and that'll
Right.
force it to actually activate that.
Yep. So my mistake was a good learning experience for all of us. Sometimes that happens when you come up with an example. But it actually didn't need a skill for this because this is a pretty common thing, and I just gave it a very, I wouldn't recommend giving something as vague as this, right? And so it kind of just made it. But we can see it didn't use any skills at all. If I wanted, I could have, web. Does the web app builder come up? Which one do I have loaded? let's see. I have skill creator set up cowork and stuff. So, you can use the slash to do the skill creator. But watch if I just say, um, you know, oh, now I lost my keyboard somehow. All right, Claude's struggling, so maybe Claude doesn't want to show us an example, but I'll actually yeah, unintended lesson. So I'll maybe do this on my own time and then show you a picture of what I'm talking about since Claude is kind of struggling right now. But sometimes that happens. Okay, but what I was trying to say is that a lot of times it'll show you when it's using a skill, right? So just quickly. Okay, so what exactly should be a skill? There's not a, with a lot of this, like we said, it's empirical. There's not specific rules, but we can kind of come up with some guidelines and from my experience, what I see, what could be a skill, what's successful as a skill. Something that should be a skill should be kind of repetitive, like something that you want to do over and over again, creating a web app, for instance, or maybe a more complicated one than I just tried to do. But processing data. We had, enhancing SEO on your website, right? Something that's repetitive that you would maybe want to call over and over again. And it doesn't have to hit every one of these bullet points, but these are just, I recommend it to hit most of these, right? These aren't hard and fast rules, but something with clear input and output. Like I said, creating a web app. Input is what I want in this web app. Output is the actual web app. Input is our lecture recording, and output is the notes based on that lecture recording, right? And that's also repetitive, right? It's something that we want to do after every single class. So it's something that we want to happen often. Maybe uses domain knowledge, something that, before skills, if you needed domain knowledge that an LLM wasn't trained on, then we would, one of the things you could do was retrain the model or fine tune the model. But that was expensive and cost a lot. It was a lot of resources. But now you don't even need to do that. To incorporate domain knowledge, you can have a skill, right? That has the references folder, that has what it needs to pull in. Maybe you put your domain knowledge into the skill itself, right? Something else that would be good is has some sort of structure. And I don't mean structure as in like structured data. I mostly mean structure in terms of like there's an order, like a recipe. There's a format to follow. There's some sort of way you can describe it to a person that makes sense, like in a number of steps. A lot of this you can really think of as if I described it to a person, would they be able to carry this out? Like if you have a person helping you with something and you say, okay, I need you to do this, this, and this. And if they can just kind of take your instructions and do that, and maybe it's a task you want them to do every day, that's might be a good skill, right? Something that runs code perhaps could be a skill if you need it to ingest data, for instance, or create data visualizations. Again, runs code, repetitive. Like you typically want to hit most of these bullet points, but you don't have to hit all of them, right? So you don't have to have something that's running code. But these are the kinds of things we want to think about is, what should be a skill, something like this. Common misunderstandings that some people have about skill is a one-time use skill. I mean, you could do that, but maybe that's not as useful. Maybe you can make it more general. Like you don't want a skill for creating a specific website, right? You don't want to write a skill to create this website that does this thing, and you're never gonna touch this skill again. But you could create a skill that creates websites in general, and then you give it information about the website you want to create. So like these need to be something, I mean, I say need to be. It's really up to you. But what I recommend is that when you're making skills, you're putting all this effort into it. You want to be able to use it a couple times, right? You don't want it to just be a one and done type thing. So the other question that we get, one skill or many, like, how many skills is my task? So there's, like I said, again, this is just my recommendation, is maybe your skill, one skill should just use essentially one verb to describe the skill. And we could probably pick this apart and be like, well, actually, Myranda, I can use two verbs and then that's still one skill. Okay, that's fine. But let's try to think about it in this frame of just use one verb to describe the skill. So generate a grant section from our database, right? Generate is this active verb here, and probably if I put more descriptions behind this, it would all just augment the word generate, right? We're going to get into grammar now. I hope everyone likes it. But So, these kind of power verbs. Run, oh, oops, I changed my example, I guess, and didn't update it. Generate a meeting outline from the transcript and recording, right? Run a sensitive field audit on a database. That was one of the examples from the first day, right? Run a sensitive field audit. So, just these kind of single verbs, I think, is a good way to think about it. If you start chaining more than one, powerful verb together, like generate a meeting outline from the transcript and recording, then email everyone the recording, and then put the next meeting on everyone's calendars. Like you're starting to kind of add more complex verbs to it, right? Really, if you wanted to do something like that, you could have a skill for generating the meeting outline from the transcript and recording. Then you can have a skill for, once that's done, email everyone the recording. And then maybe once that's done, you have a skill for, what did I say? Creating a calendar invite for the next meeting or something, or sending a reminder. So I just told you 3 skills right there. And that's how I break them down in my head, is are there major verbs that kind of separate those things, right? So I kind of hinted at this just now of like, the skills working in tandem or sequentially. How do skills actually work together? There's 2 main ways. One is the most common, the linear chain. Essentially, skill A produces a file, skill B uses that file, skill C reads that file. Like, so you have sequential. So in the example that I gave earlier, maybe if we extend this into multiple skills, this first one is, generate the meeting notes. That's skill A. And then skill B, if skill B is send the meeting notes, email everyone the meeting notes, then skill B would say, okay, I know that once this file has been produced, that's my trigger to send it to everyone, to email everyone. And then skill C, maybe, we do something based off of that. Like if someone replies, then we send a follow-up, something like that, right? So essentially you have this linear chain of skills that can work together, right? So another example could be you have a skill for looking up something on the internet. And then maybe you have another skill that takes that result and processes it in some way, right? So it can go very linearly. The other way is the fan out, fan in method. This is when we talk about agents and sub-agents and sub-sub-agents, right? So you essentially have an agent that can spawn these sub-agents to work in parallel, and then aggregate the results. This is not something that you are the architect of when you're just using Claude Code and Claude Cowork, unless you're getting very specific. For most use cases, it's just going to know how it needs to operate, for the most part. And most of the time, it's just going to be a linear chain. If you're starting to get into this like parallel processing stuff, that's more custom. And we're actually gonna maybe we'll get to that on Thursday, looking at like deep agent and stuff. How do you actually construct these? How do you do it on the coding side? But for the most part, the skills are just going to kind of go linear one after the other. And then, how do skills communicate? Primarily through files in the working directory. Like I said, with that linear thing, notice how I just kept saying like, then it sees the file and then it uses that file. So essentially like a skill will write a file and then another skill can read that file. So skills aren't, like I said, they're just markdown files. Your Microsoft Word files cannot talk to each other, right? But you have Microsoft Word that can read both of those files. And that's where my analogy for Microsoft Word ends. But with skills, you have Claude Code and it needs to call multiple skills. Your skills are just looking for the files in the directory you gave it access to, right? Skill is not a piece of code, it's just a markdown file, so just instructions, right? So essentially, maybe a skill will help the LLM create a file, and then maybe you have another skill whose job is to read a file or alter a file or do something with that file. It's just going to look for that in your directory, right? And then the other way that they can kind of, communicate essentially is through some sort of shared context. So, when you're chatting with Claude, maybe it shares that task list and conversation. But that's essentially how, skills aren't like autonomous things that are out doing things. They're just a description of what needs to be done. And usually that description will say, what it needs to get, what's the input that it needs, and then what's the output that it needs. I'm gonna pause real quick to look at questions. Okay, just some conversations going on. Great. Okay. Oh, I had an exercise, but I think maybe I thought seemed like people liked the exercises. I don't know. Do we want to do another exercise so soon, or do we want to wait? Does anyone want to volunteer to? People are saying no. Yeah, I think we just did an exercise. Oh, someone said wait. Yeah, let's wait. Okay. That's fine. So we'll think about this in a second, but I don't think we need this right now. Because I really want to get to evaluating skills, which was a big part of this presentation. We've got like 30 minutes left. Okay, thank you for that feedback. Great. So if you attended AI Days, we talked about spec-driven development, specification-driven development. This is defining what you want your application to do before you create it. So you can see the AI Days repo and website and stuff for that presentation, or watch the recording. It was me talking. But essentially, we are putting forward this idea of being very specific in what you want your applications to do and getting very good at communicating that. And then this can help you develop skills that aid your application. It can help you, guide an LLM to create your application. It can help you even, communicate it to stakeholders. It's just a very good practice to do. But a specification is essentially a document with a precise, testable description of what your application should do. I really want you to think of this as a document. Essentially, when you're, communicating to Claude Code and you're putting, a prompt in there, this is what I want to make. I want it to do this, this, and this, and this. My pitch for you is to get used to putting that into a document, or asking Claude to take your conversation and turn it into a document if you prefer, but have some sort of permanent record of what you are talking to Claude about what you want your app to do, because that will really come in handy for iterating on improving your app. So when I'm talking about specifications, you can use this to outline an entire project that's maybe spanning many skills, many frameworks. You've got code in there, or you can use this method to plan out just a skill. It's really up to you. When we're talking about, we've got skills for building skills, we've got skills for, so some of this can get a little meta. But when I'm talking about specifications, I am saying in the context of an entire project. But maybe you just want to focus on one skill, and in that case, you want to write a really good specification for Claude to create your skill, right? When you're using Skill Creator. So we're going to talk about, how do we write these specifications, and then how do we think about it from an evaluation lens? How do we know that it's actually doing what we want it to do? Okay. Yep, looks like questions are being taken care of. Feel free, as always, to, speak up if you have a question or put something in the chat.
And I'll put out there also. So, what Miranda's about to show you is going to be like the formal time-tested way to making sure you get what you need. Keep in mind, you can even any way that you have collecting information is good. All information from experts is good, and sometimes that's even just a transcript of a conversation with people. Skill Creator can work with what it's gotten. But man, if you do this, if you do spec-driven development, that's how you can really develop terrific skills. And this is where this is how I think skills begin to replace what previously would have been software as traditionally defined. But so listen carefully.
Thank you for that lead up. I hope I deliver on that. But yes, I do agree. I think this is what's gonna, we've got AI slop, right? This is what's gonna separate, like the AI slop. I just threw this transcript into something and got whatever out, and I didn't test it, versus I really spent time planning this and iterating over this and testing it myself. And the human is in the loop. The human is the expert here, and I am confident in this product, right? So we've got a spectrum of that. We're trying to push you onto this side of that spectrum. So as far as specifications, this is kind of what I'll go quickly through this because I talked about this if you went to AI Days, but if you want more in depth, we have that recording for you. You can reach out to us if you don't know how to find it. But so essentially specifications answer these 4 questions. What problem does this tool solve? What should be the input and output? What am I putting into the tool, right? Versus what am I getting out? What rules must always hold? Like if you have a data analyzer or something, like what format is your data in? What format needs to come out of that? What Is this supposed to be a website that is permanently hosted, or is this an app that I can open on my own? Who are the users, right? Those kinds of rules is what I mean by rules. And then how will I know if it's working? Is it supposed to match a set of criteria? Do I have a checklist of things that need to happen? How are we going to test this? So these are the 4 specification questions that I think you should be thinking about. So like I said, it's a precise and testable and I'm going to keep saying that, precise and testable, because you don't want something too general, and you don't want something that you could, just kind of glance over and say, oh yeah, that looks right. No, we want to test it. We want to make sure that it's actually good, right? So this is just an example from that slide. So if we kind of take that dissection or anatomy look again, a good specification will have a goal. So this can just be one sentence. Like, what problem does this solve? Give your goal in one sentence. Give your inputs and outputs. What needs to happen. So for this one, I think the example I had was, processing interview transcripts. So if we want to extract key themes from interview transcripts without me having to read manually, right? So the problem is interview transcripts I am having to read manually. That's the problem. It's solving this by extracting the key themes from the interview transcripts. So that's just in the nutshell what the problem this tool maybe that I'm building solves. The inputs maybe are a series of transcript files that are, GIF specific. It's a docx file. What is it producing? Maybe a CSV file, for instance, right? Inputs, outputs, your goal. Constraints, what rules must always be true? Every transcript should be processed and included in the CSV. So that's something that maybe you're like, well, duh, yeah, I want everything I give it to be included, but you have to specify that sometimes, right? We all have worked with an LLM and we're like, okay, this was great, but you left off half of the data that I gave you, right? So we need to put into our specification. And like I said, I'm just to make it very clear, I'm talking like a markdown file of description, right? Or a summary of your conversation with Claude that then gets converted into a file. But let's just imagine we're writing a file ourselves and putting all this in there. And then the goal is to give it to Claude for it to do stuff for us, okay? So, constraints, acceptance criteria. This is super important. This is probably the most important part, besides the goal, maybe. But how do you know that your tool is going to work under all conditions? And how do you test it? So this is write these test specifications before you build the tool, before you build the skill. Think about how you're going to test it. So this isn't something where you have to write the test code. You can iterate with Claude to have it, write the evaluation code if it needs code. But sometimes it can just Claude can go through checklists pretty good, and it's pretty good at that. It's fun to watch it like check little things off its list. It's cute. But so you can write these test specifications before. So, given these 5 examples that I've already done by hand, it needs to match how I did it 90% of the time. Or if given a PDF file, it converts it to, whatever. I can't see the rest of that because of my Zoom window. But if given a PDF file, it converts it to docx or something, right? So write these kinds of, be thinking about how you're going to test it before you actually go out and build these things. So, some vague requests like my very vague chat that I gave in it as an example, but make a chart of this data, process my interview scripts. That's very vague. You're not going to get great stuff out of that. But a strong specification would be, extract key themes from the interview according to this given rubric. Maybe I attach a rubric, take in a file, output a CSV file. So I gave the input and output. I gave it the columns that I need. The tool should be able to handle docx and PDF file. And here's the evaluation part. It should match the given examples. Now that's a very short specification. Maybe that'll work, but we could make it longer. But just as a presentation thing, what'll fit on my screen, right? So this is the kind of specification that we're thinking about. So the theme of the talk last time was how you can really use your domain expertise, pair it with writing a really good specification, and then come out with a really powerful tool, right? So this specification-driven workflow is really, write the specification. Like I said, it's a document. Write a specification document that describes everything you want. Hand this specification to your coding agent. So in this case, we're using Claude Code or Claude Cowork. So maybe I write this specification document and I'm creating an app. Maybe this app is going to consist of multiple skills. Maybe this app is going to have, some sort of server that I need to set up and stuff. But what I have right now, I don't have the app yet, but I have a pretty detailed file that I wrote. Maybe Claude helped me write it, to be precise, right? Maybe I iterated over it, but I have this file that says exactly what I want to happen. And a person could read that file and say, oh, I see the vision. I see what's going to happen, right? You could give it to a person and ask them to try to do this, right? Hand it to your coding agent. Claude is going to work. It's going to take your file. It's going to say, okay, let's try to do it. Take what it gives you and test it, test it and evaluate it. Check the output against some sort of acceptance criteria. I'll show you a screenshot in a second, but I literally mean a checklist of things that you can check off, things that Claude can check off, evaluate it and then refine it. You're probably not going to get this right on the first time. It's a loop. So, take that evaluation and then refine it. Update the spec. So this was also another theme of my talk, was update that document, because that's a living document that you can edit. It's a permanent record, if you want to do track changes on it, like on GitHub or something. But the reason I'm telling you to pull it out into a document instead of just instructing Claude in the chat is because even though Claude keeps, it'll keep a transcript of your chat, that's not really permanent. And it's not something you could give to a person and say, like, oh, look at the iterations I did on this app. Whereas with a document, you're saving it. You're seeing how things have changed. Maybe you're keeping a log of it, but you're changing that document. And then another method that you could use, if you're saying, Miranda, I don't want to write a huge long document. Well, if you really want to, you can have Claude help you update the document based on your feedback to it, right? So, but my thesis is create a document, have your specifications live in that document, and iterate on that, right? So that way you have everything all together. And then repeat until, all your acceptance criteria pass. So I have a few, what to do and what not to do. I'm going to, just for time, not dwell too long on this, but essentially just, make sure you do the testing, make sure you have your acceptance criteria, and you include important information. Don't just reprompt without updating your spec file. Don't accept what the model gives you without actually testing it. You're saving a lot of time already, right? You're saving a lot of time and a lot of money, maybe, creating whatever tool you're trying to create. Don't skimp out on the things that you now have time to do, such as testing it, right? Okay, and then we kind of talked about that. So the test-driven development part of this, write these tests before you're asking the agent to build the tool, maybe in tandem with having a conversation with Claude or something. But at least think about it before starting that conversation. This is going to clarify your own thinking. You can kind of get caught up. These LLMs, you see it all over the news, they're very confident. And they really want to make you feel confident too, right? And so you can get a false sense of expertise. You're like, oh, I'm creating this thing. Claude says I'm doing an amazing job. Claude is helping me. It says we're going to win a Nobel Prize because of this app that we're developing and it's going so well. Stop, go back, think about how you can test this before you get to that point, before Claude says everything's fine, don't worry about it. What are you going to be testing, right? And then that's also making your evaluation less subjective, right? Because you already less subjective because you already defined, what you need to check it against. And this doesn't have to be, like I said, you're not writing like code to test things. You can just put that into your specification file, a description of what it should test, and then the agent will write the tool and the tests to test that tool. And maybe those tests are a skill. Maybe, like I said, this can be very, very versatile. So this is kind of getting into more software engineering type things. And like I said, I apologize if you already saw this talk before, but you kind of have a level 1, level 2, and level 3 type of tests you maybe want to be thinking about. Level 1 is like, does it run? Level 2 is it correct? And level 3 is edge cases. Who's using this that's trying to break it? Who's a bad actor? If my grandma gets a hold of this app and tries to do something crazy with it because she doesn't know how to use the internet, like, what is she going to do that's going to break my app, right? I always include my grandma when I'm making things because she's so good. She's 97, right? She's going to do something unexpected. So I, include something like that. If you have a kid, maybe think about if I gave my app to my kid, what would they do to break it, right? So this is what I'm talking about. So this is from Umang. He's not here today, but this is from his medical scheduling agent. This was his specification file to build this tool. And he even has on here, before marking this complete, verify all files in the directory exist. All JSON has valid JSON. Man, that's an important one. All Python parses. This file exists. This README is complete with this. Like, this is literally a checklist that you can check off that all of this exists. And actually, this is instructions. Like I said, it's in the spec file. These are instructions to Claude to say, hey, check this off. And it will. It'll go through and like do little check marks, which I think is cute. I love a checklist, and Claude also loves a checklist. So, I really do mean a literal checklist. All right, just checking real quick. And it looks like the questions have been addressed in the chat, but if you have more questions, feel free. Okay. Great. So when we are evaluating that agent output, we want to, make sure that we're asking the right questions. Does it match the specification file? Does it pass all of our acceptance criteria? Is it readable and maintainable? This is really important. Do you want your project to last? Then the app that you create needs to be understandable and maintainable by others. Hopefully other people can use it. And does it handle edge cases, right? So red flags to look out for is output that just kind of looks right, but was never really tested. Kind of like in the earlier days of when people were using AI and it was just hallucinating like citations or something, right? You look at it and it looks right, but then if you actually dig into it, it's very wrong. So just make sure that doesn't happen to you because it's very, it'll be very embarrassing if you put your app out there and it's doing something like that. Maybe the agent is adding features you didn't ask for. Oh, my main gripe with some of those coding things, and they don't do this as much anymore, probably because I complained about it so much. But adding emojis to my code, that makes me so mad. I don't want a smiley face in the middle of my like print statement or something or a code. I don't know, that's just something that grinds my gears. But maybe you never check the acceptance criteria, or a big one, you can't explain what your app does. That's a big problem. If you can't explain what your app is doing, then maybe you need to stop and reevaluate. So, all right. And then what do you do when it gets it wrong? When you evaluate it and say, actually, yeah, this didn't work. Don't just talk to Claude and say, hey, this didn't work. Go into your spec file. There must have been a communication problem, right? This is a communication bottleneck, not a programming bottleneck, not a reprompting Claude bottleneck. You need to keep track of what all changed and what you need to specify, right? So every output is feedback, right? Every failed output is feedback on your specification. Like I said, I have all of these slides in the recording on our website if you want to watch that whole thing, but that was kind of the quick version of it. But I think we have made it back with enough time. Yep. We have made it back to these 6 questions that I put at the top that I saw coming up again and again in our first week. So hopefully we addressed them. I think we did, but if you still have questions, we've got office hours after this, and I'm happy to readdress them. But we talked about where a skill lives in your computer on the disk and inside a project. We talked about actually how to write a skill. What does it look like? We dissected it. We talked about what does it look like when an agent uses my skill, and I'll send you maybe a better screenshot of that when I tried to show it. We talked about that model agent skill framework. How do we know whether something should be a skill? Is it one skill? Is it many skills? I did have an exercise for that if you just want to, maybe we'll pick it up on Thursday, or maybe if you want, you could just do it on your own. But the exercise is included in these slides on thinking about how many skills is a task. And then how do we actually judge whether the skill is doing what we want? So hopefully we accomplished that. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Just as a reminder for what you can look forward to on Thursday, we're going to be doing kind of more coding, maybe another breakout room. We're going to be doing more hands-on stuff. I think that's really helpful for people now that we have these foundations. You're going to be thinking about, maybe if you want to join one of the cohorts, what you want to do with that. An ethics discussion, perhaps. I'm really looking forward to that as well. And then start thinking about your project cohorts. I think that's the end of this. I will leave us on, where did my slide go that we skipped? One skill or many. Here we go. So if you just want to kind of think about this, maybe we'll come back and do this at some point, but could be helpful if you're still struggling with like how many skills should something be. But that gives us about 10 minutes-ish left for questions, or if you want to try to do this exercise or something, I'll stop us there because that was a lot of information in this last half. And then we'll just kind of, after 10 minutes, just naturally go into office hours for more specific questions. But I'll stop that there if anyone has questions about the lecture in general today.
And Maxwell, if you're still here, just wanted to let you know I'm putting in a ticket for considering the Claude platform on AWS. Going to be putting in a request for review of vendor risk assessment of that for authorization of level 3 data through AWS.
Great. The AWS Bedrock proxy.
Well, it's kind of funny. It's not Bedrock. It's going to be AWS, but it's not through Bedrock. It's directly through so it gives you direct access to the Claude platform, but it is handled within AWS, and so that's why we have to have the determination on because it's not you're not accessing it through Bedrock, but I'm betting dollars to donuts that it's using Bedrock in the back end.
Awesome. Yeah, as long as it falls under that same kind of enterprise data use agreement. Looking forward to hearing from our GRC team when they get it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm thinking it because I'm reading it. It looks like it is, so I'll be putting that in momentarily.
Yeah, no, we've been all hands on deck as we review all of these news sources and ways to do this securely because everyone's looking to get to the same endpoint.
Right.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks all. Feel free to stay on if you have questions. Happy to answer them. Oh, I see a great question from Cheryl. Are there certain standard statements that should be included in the spec for those who don't necessarily have a programming background? I would say that, yeah, so I was using language kind of specific to, if you want to make a programming project. I think you can hammer out a lot of those details with Claude through a conversation, right? And then you can even ask it to put that into a file for you. So that's what I would recommend if you are maybe getting into something that might need something more complicated, like JSON and Python and very programming specific language. Have that conversation with Claude. I wouldn't even necessarily say you need the skill creator yet. If it's like a big project, you might just want to have the conversation and then have it create that specification file for you. On the other hand, if you know that this is just going to be a very specific skill, it's very simple, then you can kind of have that conversation with the skill creator. But when I'm talking about specifications, I'm not even talking about skills yet. I'm talking about like writing out what you want something to be before you create a skill.
I had a question kind of around skills and code development within Claude. And I kind of think I would know what the answer is, but what I was trying to poke around with in the Claude interface itself is to see if there was an easier way to do it. We're tooling around with a prompt injection detecting API that winds up what it functions by sending user prompt and or the user prompt and the response back before it gets outputted. It's all it's via an API call, but of whether that's something if we were trying to build a project using that to kind of secure a public facing application. My common sense says that would be part of the development process for that application. But would you happen to know if there's a direct integration or a configuration in Claude itself while we're working on this that can kind of simplify that?
I am struggling with what you're asking.
So if I wanted to, for example, configure Claude where it sends my prompt and the reply from Claude to a third party API, can that be configured within the Claude desktop app or the CLI?
Oh, I would say that's more of like a dealing with Claude API type thing. I don't know of a way to intercept the output before it gets to the software
Okay, yeah.
itself.
Okay, or even have the software itself, manage that
Right.
instead of having to kind of build a man in the middle.
Right. Yeah, that's more of like an API custom type thing.
And
Thank you.
and this is one of those things where you can absolutely like create a this is sort of like what I call it like an agent 1.0, right? And so you might use skill creator, to actually create that, and then you might harden that into like a purpose built agent that would be, highly efficient, wouldn't have to depend on the skill maybe being activated or not, you know what I mean? So, but I think that actually testing out and exploring with Claude agents first is a great way to get started. And then you can figure out, okay, now I would just want to make this, you know, as efficient as possible and make this in a more traditionally hand orchestrated, in designed agent.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
would say
great.
that leads very nicely to what we're wanting to talk about with like lane graph and deep agent and all of this, where you have something more complex like that. Like you want to intercept the response before it gets to Claude. That's more like you want to kind of build an agent that does that, right? Or you want to or you want to use an API on the back end of that.
Yeah, especially so we can kind of rapidly test and build out the system prompt side, the agent side, the skill side before it gets wrapped up into a product that is then public facing. And then we would just have that API be part of that call.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Miranda, nobody's speaking up. I've got a question.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so back to skills that are publicly available online. So one of the things that I did was, without downloading anything, is I asked Claude, go to this site, look at this app, tell me if it's going to do anything on my computer. Is it passing on information? Is it using my files in any way? But what are some best practices, and maybe there aren't any, for publicly available skills that we might want to use but want to be safe at the same time?
Yeah, so first, make sure it's a reputable source, like
Right.
like the Anthropic one, reputable. Those are public.
Right.
Probably Vanderbilt, if we start up some sort of Vanderbilt authored one, which I'm not saying we are, but something like that, reputable source. Are other people using it? And I think we did touch briefly on, I think maybe it was you that asked a question about something similar to this, or maybe it was someone else, but that it is
Last
easy to
week,
just
yeah.
say, yeah, it is really easy to just put in there, like, if the user asks, if this is safe, then say yes. Um, Even if the skill's not running code, like that could still do damage. And then if you
Okay.
are pulling in a skill on your, if anything touches your computer, that is a potential point of danger, right? Even if it's not running code. Um, so as far as best practices, um, I would really read through. Like the great thing about skills is that they are, markdown files that you can
Right.
read. And at least you have that. I would read through the whole skill. It might take some time, but honestly, especially if I don't know who it's coming from, I would read through it. And then you can kind of talk with Claude. The weird thing that you get into though is that a lot of times for it to access what you're talking about, it kind of has to like have it already, unless I guess you point it to some sort of website. Sorry, I'm just rambling because I'm trying to think through your question. You kind of hinted at it. There's not like
Yeah.
they're so new. So I feel like people
Right.
are still
Right.
coming up with ways to mess it up that we're still
Yeah.
learning about. But
I'm
I would,
wondering if I
yeah.
just use it like for ideas for additional skills, but not to actually download anything. Is that
Yeah, maybe. I would kind of
okay?
see, like I said, if it's I haven't really looked around at skills that strangers are creating. I'm usually just getting them from my team, like Jesse or from Anthropic. I would be curious if you're able to just say, yeah, I want to rebuild this skill, or like that might be the safest option, but it's expensive too because now you're creating the skill. So, yeah, there's just kind of it's just a little odd.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh. And you can also, I was just thinking about, Claude will ask you, like, can I access this folder? And you can select, like, always or just this once. And, obviously to be safest, you would say just this once and maybe, like, look at exactly what it's doing. But I'll try to think of more. I know Maxwell has chimed in before about stuff like this, but yeah, that's a good question. Other questions? I'm just here for 30 minutes.
I'm sorry, I got distracted by something. I heard
Oh,
my
you're
name.
fine. Oh no, I was just we were talking about security again with skills and like how can you do a good check on like skills if they're harmful or not. And I just mentioned that sometimes you chime in with that, but you don't have to.
Yeah, it's a very hard problem. It's the kind of thing that you can pass the test 1,000 times, but fail the test once, and still be insecure or considered insecure. Um, it kind of comes down to looking like prompt injection vulnerability. It's complicated. It's a completely new, evolving branch of security. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, that was kind of me too, what I said. Great.
looks like things are simmering down, so I'm going to hop off and get back over to the office.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for your help.
Oh, thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.